I was at the grocery store the other day, and the lady behind the cash counter recognized me, and she said to me, "Can I ask you something? Do we still not eat meat on Fridays of Lent? Is that still a thing?" She was rather loud, and there were a lot of people behind the counter, and I just nodded my head and I said, yes, we still do that. And she said to me, "I never eat meat on Fridays of Lent." And I tell you what, I couldn't have met a prouder Catholic that day. For many lapsed and careless Catholics, it is more important to not eat meat on Fridays than to go for Mass on Sundays. In fact, they consider eating meat on Fridays of Lent to be a more serious sin than missing Mass on Sundays of Lent. So, Lent is here, and I'm wondering what your plans are for Lent. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's a trick question. Because the focus of the readings on Ash Wednesday are on fasting and prayer and almsgiving, we might think that Lent is inviting us to do some things. And I'm not saying that that's not right. The doing, whatever it is that we do, is for a becoming. In other words, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving are not for their own sake. Lent invites us to become, not do. Become better people. Lent is an invitation for us to become the kind of persons that God wants us to be. Lent is an invitation to become better followers of Christ than we are today. In the first reading on Ash Wednesday, God says to the people, "Return to me with your whole heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your hearts, not your garments." In other words, something deep has to happen within us during Lent. In the gospel reading, notice that when Jesus teaches us about fasting and prayer and almsgiving, he says, "Do not be like the hypocrites." Did you hear that? Do not be. Do not become like the hypocrites. The word Jesus is saying, we have to be different. We have to become better people. It's an invitation to become the kind of persons and people that God wants us to become. So the question this Lent is not what you are going to do. It's not about giving up meat on Fridays. Perhaps it's not even about almsgiving and prayer and fasting. The question is if we did all these things and there was no genuine transformation, then what is the difference between hypocrites and us? If we only rend our garments and we don't rend our hearts, what is the difference between hypocrites and us? If at the end of Lent we are the same people that we were at the beginning of Lent, what is the difference between hypocrites and us? So the question is not what we do, rather the question is, who do I need to become so that God sees that I have rent my heart? Our ultimate goal should be to become a little more like Christ. Let us not rend only our garments. Let us rend our hearts and take on the heart of Jesus. I must conclude with some very encouraging words from the scriptures on Ash Wednesday. Prophet Joel says, "For gracious and merciful is the Lord, slow to anger, rich in kindness." That is who God is. And God wants us to become like Him. I hope you have a blessed Lent.